question was, here, I'll just recap it. Here, you hold it and videotape me then. So what do you think are the most important characteristics of someone in Christian leadership? Why? I said number one, character. God, he always builds a worker first, and then he builds a work. And it's always in that order. So I believe character is number one. Who you are when nobody's looking. What do you do when presented with temptation and a shortcut? Those are some important questions that answer character. Number two, I guess, would be, I'd say humility, because as a leader, you got a big target on your chest, and like people are always gonna like point out your weaknesses and your failures and stuff. So you need to be humble and realize that it's not about being a rock star; it's about learning. And I think learning happens best when you're humble and you realize you have a lot to learn. Number three, most important thing about being a leader. I would say passion, because if you don't have passion, if you're not fired up about something, people don't want to follow you. I don't want to follow people that look bored or that are boring. So you got to be passionate. You got to be excited. You got to be pumped about something. So those are my top three.
Okay. The next question is, how have you developed these traits?
Well, over many years, just being involved. When I became a Christian in high school, I started playing on the worship band at my youth group. I was on student leadership. I helped lead the Christian youth group at my high school. After I graduated high school, I went and did an internship for free at a church. I did junior high ministry and high school ministry for free. I worked in the day and just went to the church every night of the week, and on weekends gave a lot of time serving. Just my own walk with God. I listen to a lot of sermons. I read a lot of books, as you can see over there. So I've developed those traits over years just by being immersed in it. And experience is life's best teacher. You can read about it all you want to, but until you're actually serving and you're in the trenches, because here's what I've learned: the things you learn in your head on paper, it's always easy because it's like it's happening in this perfect world. But in the real world, life's not perfect, and life's not fair. And there's jerks and meanies and poo heads and people that are going to make it difficult, and you have to flesh out what you've learned in your head, which is about being humble and being passionate and all that. You have to actually live it, and it's harder to live it than it is to learn it, in terms of book smarts. So I've developed those traits just by experience and not giving up, I guess.
The next one is, has your faith made a difference in the way you view leadership? And if so, then and how about the way you lead?
Yeah, it certainly has made a difference. I think if you study history, both Christian history and just like regular history, you'll see that God raises up certain people in certain times to do things for Him in a way that might not have happened 5 years. So timing is a big issue with God. You can be doing all the right things, working really, really hard, but God has His timing sometimes, and it doesn't always happen the way we want it to. So my faith in God tells me that even when I'm not seeing the results that I would like to see, is that God has called me just to be faithful, to preach God's word, to be in prayer, get to know students, try to shepherd them and be their pastor and stuff. And if the results aren't there, all I can do is, well, God, I'm doing what you asked me to do, and I'm trying to learn, still trying to do stuff. So my faith is, I guess it's taught me patience, and faith has also taught me that, not in God's kingdom, not everyone is a Billy Graham or the person on stage. I think the biggest heroes we're going to meet in heaven are people no one has heard of. They were just praying all the time and doing the little things. I think Billy Graham, he had a Sunday school teacher no one had ever heard of, and yet Billy Graham, he credits his Sunday school teacher for being one of the most profound influences on his life and in his call to ministry. So everyone would look at Billy Graham and say, oh wow, he's so awesome. Billy Graham would say, I am nothing, I'm nobody. My Sunday school teacher, he was the best. So I guess my view of leadership has been affected by knowing that God, He calls some to be these very noticeable people, and others He's called just to kind of just do your thing, and both are equal in God's eyes. But yeah, how's that?
Good. And the next question is, who are some inspiring leaders that you admire?
Inspiring leaders. Sorry, I was making silly faces.
And
You'll discover all my
why?
silly faces later. Okay, people I admire and why in Christian leadership.
Yes.
Billy Graham is right up there. Billy Graham, he traveled in hotels all over the world, and he always had an accountability partner with him. And it's interesting because a lot of leaders, they'd say, "Oh, trust me, I'm fine," or they'd say, "I'm strong. I won't fall into temptation." And Billy Graham was smart enough to say, "You know what? Any one of us are capable of doing anything." So he always made sure he had an accountability partner with him, just to make sure he didn't look at anything he shouldn't be looking at or go to places he shouldn't be going to. So Billy Graham, I admire him for that reason. He's one of the few televangelists that hasn't been caught up in a scandal or whatever. So Billy Graham, he's awesome. Other Christian leaders I admire. There's a guy named Louis Giglio that I admire greatly. He's an excellent communicator, and he's all in it. At least you watch him and you're like, man, this guy, he's really in it for Jesus. It's about pointing all the attention to Jesus, not like, hey, I'm Louis Giglio, look how awesome I am. But he is pretty awesome, but he still continues to point people to Christ. So I don't know. Louis Giglio. Mother Teresa, she's pretty cool. A guy named Henry Nouwen, he was like this Harvard University professor, and he gave that all up to go live with some mentally handicapped people in Toronto, actually. Labrie, I think, or am I thinking of some other guy? Larsh, I don't know. But, yeah, those are 3 people off the bat, I guess, and a number of pastors and board members and accountability partners I've had that you wouldn't have heard of. But, yeah.
Mm-hmm. What experiences, teaching challenges prepared you for your leading or your role now?
Well, in Orangeville, it was my first pastoral position in Orangeville. I took it in 2002 as a 22-year-old. And within a couple years, I was convinced that I was either going to be fired or that I should quit, because it was extremely difficult. There was a segment of people that really didn't like me, that I don't know if they had confidence in my ability to lead. And I had a pretty significant depression where for 2 weeks or so, I just come home after work and sit on the couch, and I honestly wouldn't want to move, and I wasn't that interested in playing with my kids or talking to my wife. I was just depressed. Wasn't eating a lot. I wasn't sleeping so well, and I was close to quitting. And I just remember as I prayed about it and was calling out to God, I just sensed God was saying, "Mike, I want you to hang in there. I'm trying to teach you something." And so, anyways, I came out of that and said, "Okay, God, I'm going to do whatever you want me to do." Hey, look, I'm on Flash. No, I'm not. I'm blind now. But that just taught, and so I hung in there, and I stayed for another couple years, and eventually some of the same circumstances that was making me feel depressed earlier, they eventually, I had a senior pastor that, great guy, but I wasn't the guy that he wanted, I don't think, and he made that clear about 4 years in. Even though I was successful from beginning to end, you look at the numbers of students attending, my relationship with parents, the congregation, I led worship regularly, they loved me, I had a great relationship with seniors, and yet I was still asked to, essentially asked to leave. And that was very difficult, but when I left that church, it was crazy. They didn't ask, like Earl, he just said, "Hey, let's thank Mike and Tanya for the work," and people started clapping in the service, and then it kept on going. People kept clapping. It was like, okay, 30 seconds of clapping, and then people started standing, and I got like a 1-minute standing ovation that wasn't like obligatory. It wasn't like people were just like, oh, they have to do this. I'm looking around, and there's people that I know I made a big difference in their life, and had I quit when I felt like I should quit, I wouldn't have seen any of that, and so God, He's taught me a lot through my pain and through frustration and feeling like I'm not making a difference. I realized in Orangeville, all those years I felt like I wasn't making a difference. That it's not like people line up at your door to say, "Thank you, Pastor Mike." They just figure so they'll leave, and you only hear the bad. That's one thing as a leader. Most of the time, you're only going to hear the bad from people. If you're doing good, they just expect you're doing good, but they'll come to you when there's a problem. So, anyways, I just remember in Orangeville seeing all these people. I'm like, man, I didn't think they I didn't think like I was making a difference, and I learned, wow, I made a big difference, and I wouldn't have seen that if I quit. So I guess just God uses painful times in leadership to teach you that God's grace is sufficient, and it's about Him, it's not about you, and as long as you're willing to follow Him wherever He leads, and not give up, He'll impress you. God always amazes me with how He uses me despite my, I don't know, feelings and all that stuff. So.
What activities or experiences do you think a young person should get involved in order to train to be an effective leader?
Weekly, regular ministry, helping the children's thing. Well, maybe that's not a weekly thing because you need to be in church yourself. But serving as many things as you can. Try children's ministry once during the year. Serve on the band. Ask a pastor, hey, is there anything I can do to help? Even if it's just folding letters and putting them in envelopes. Experience is the best trainer, because this is what I've found over the years, and I'll use myself as an example. I didn't go to a ton of leadership camps or a ton of leadership, seminars or courses. I was just doing leadership from a young age. I was just doing it. I was involved doing stuff. And I had some friends or people I knew, they went to all these leadership things, and they had their leadership certificate on the wall, and they had books on leadership, and they went to leadership camp, and they did all this leader stuff. And there's nothing wrong with any of that. That's all great. I wish I would have had some more of that. But what I found is that there's a lot of people that they can talk the talk, and they have their certificate, but they're not leading. No one's following them. They don't know how to lead because they haven't been leading. They've just been learning about it. So, you'll find this, Kale, when you get your driver's license. You think you know the rules of the road, and you've studied all the stuff about driving. You're like, okay, I'm ready. And then when you get behind the wheel and it's actually your turn to drive, all of a sudden it's like everything you learned, you're like, ah! And driving a car is a lot different than knowing how to drive a car. And so I'd say the same about leadership. So I can't remember what your question was, other than just stay involved. Be involved. Don't just learn about being involved. Be involved from a young age and always be doing something. Okay.
The last question is, what are the most challenging aspects of being in the leadership?
It's lonely. I hope that's not discouraging you, but it's honest. When you're the leader, it's like, I'm a person too, right? I'm just like you. I'm just like anyone. I have interests, but people, they learn your past, and they're like, oh, and it changes the relationship. People, I don't know, often they treat you differently because you're a leader, and that's a double-edged sword. Half of that is good because I'm like, oh wow, people respect me. That's kind of cool. The other half of me is, but they can't know me for me the same way they could if I was a factory worker or whatever, right? So it's sometimes there's loneliness being a leader. As a leader, you're the target. If you screw up, everyone is there to tell you. Also, you learn what your weaknesses are as a leader. When you're leading, you learn pretty quick what you're good at and what you're not good at. And I find, for me, like I'm good at like about 2 or 3 things. There's 2 or 3 things I'm really good at. There's about like 150 things I'm not good at all. And so you learn pretty quick in ministry that, wow, like I'm not as good as I thought I was. It's difficult, just you're continually learning. And there's times when you're in a conflict with someone, they can be being the biggest jerk of all time, like really, like, I mean, they're just like, they're not fair, they're not even listening to you, they're calling you mean names, they don't even know you, and sometimes it's difficult as a leader. Like, on the outside, I have to just kind of take it and not say, I'm sorry you feel that way. Well, what can I do to help you? Like, how can we get through this? And on the inside, I'm like, what did you call me? I'm going to check you out a beat. Like you're living in 2 worlds. On your inside, you're just as human as the next, and so you're feeling hurt and attacked, and you want to like fight back or whatever. But as a pastor, as a leader, you have to be like, well, I'm sorry about that. You're right. I did make a mistake. I'm sorry about that. And so I don't know. It's difficult sometimes because you can't just let loose the way that you feel like. But that's not just a leader thing. That's what the Bible says. It says be self-controlled. It says, be filled with the Spirit. The fruit of the Spirit is peace, love, joy. So it's not just as a leader sometimes you have to do that. As a Christian, we shouldn't just like unload on somebody. But as a leader, it's tough because there's a lot of times people come to you and they're in your face. And it's tough being attacked. But that's just part of it. You read any character in the Bible that God used, you name them. Moses, David, Elijah, Jesus, Paul, all the big guys in the Bible, guess what? There was a ton of people that didn't like them. And that's just part of leadership. So not everyone's going to like you as a leader, but I'm serving Jesus, not people. So at the end of the day, as long as Jesus is happy with me, I guess I'm doing okay.
Those are all the questions I needed to ask.
Okay, great.